to go. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Michael Dockery. I'm your Keyton host for our first instalment in this new retirement living event series. Today we're coming to you from the beautiful Buderim Gardens here on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. It's one of 65 villages and resorts that Keyton has across the country. Thank you to those who have joined on site, as well as many people I understand are online with our live webinar. Wherever you're based today, I would like to acknowledge the Gubbi Gubbi people, the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Well, we're starting this series with a bang. Today's guests are Daniel Gannon, Executive Director of the Retirement Living Council of Australia. Welcome, Daniel.
You can call me whatever you like, Mike.
Yeah, I won't go straight to the surname just yet. Andrew Winter, TV host, media presenter and real estate expert. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much.
And Keyton's very own Stefanie Cassar, our General Manager of Sales. Always great to see you, Steph.
Same here, thanks Michael.
Of course, we are here because we know considering a move to a retirement community is a significant life decision. It's often a mix of practical considerations, emotional reflections, and financial questions about what you want the years ahead to look like. Today's session is aimed and designed to provide clear and practical information to help you better understand your options and feel more confident in whatever decision you decide to make. After all, it is about securing your own quality of life. We're fortunate to be joined by three wonderful experts who will share their perspectives on today's market, selling your home, understanding the retirement living journey, and getting the most out of life's next chapter. Each of our guests do have topics through the course of this morning. However, I'm sure there'll be a lot of good interaction along the way, and we will have some time just at the base to have some a Q&A session to wrap things up together. So plenty to get through, so let's get into it and begin by looking at the bigger picture. And maybe, Daniel, starting with why more people than ever are considering retirement living.
Thanks so much, Michael. Look, as a sector, we tend to focus on the over 75 population right across the country because the average age of entry into a retirement village is about 76. There's about 2 million people over the age of 75 right around the country today. This age cohort grows to 3.7 million by 2040. So over the course of the next decade and a half, there's going to be an 85% increase in the number of Australians over the age of 75. Now, when big change...
Why are you looking at me?
You are sitting to my left. That's the only reason. But when big change like this happens, and I'll make sure that I share my gaze now, Andrew, when big change like this happens, it brings all sorts of challenges and opportunities for governments, for communities, for workforces, for housing supply, in every single market across the country. So, massive population change, silver tsunami, call it whatever you like. That's also going to have a really big impact on hospitals, the aged care sector, retirement villages, the general housing market, which is of course why we like to work with governments to talk about unleashing more age-friendly supply into the market so we can help alleviate the pressures that we are seeing in state-run hospital systems. When it comes to what retirement villages can deliver for people living in those communities, we've done a lot of research over the years. So what we now know is that compared to people not living in a retirement village, so someone living across the road, people living in a retirement village are 41% happier, they're 15% more physically active, they're twice as likely to catch up with family and friends, they're 5 times more socially active, but importantly, they also experience reduced levels of loneliness and depression. Now, the World Health Organization a couple of years ago declared loneliness as a global public health concern. They likened it to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Wow. The impact of loneliness and depression in our communities right across the world. So what I love about the retirement living industry is the great health and happiness benefits that can be derived by living in a community that is designed for ageing, by living with other people, by playing bowls, by playing cards in beautiful community centres like this one. Sure, having a beer during happy hour at the bar too. But this sector delivers so much, not just to people living in these communities, but also to the broader community through healthcare efficiencies. The research that we've also done extends to hospitalisations. And so we also know that in your first 9 months of living in a retirement village, you are reducing your hospitalisation rate by almost 20% in the first 9 months. That doubles to almost 40% after the first year and a half. Now, when you stir all that together in one big pot, that leads to around 14,000 avoided hospitalisations every single year. And so what we lead with governments is that story, the healthcare story, the happy camper story, because these communities are different to the general housing market.
Daniel, it's very interesting you start there in respect to health and wellbeing benefits as opposed to looking at the subject as purchasing a home, a property play. The heart of the proposition is health and wellbeing.
Well, look, I think 20 years ago, the retirement living industry in many ways was about the property play. I think operators were very much focused on real estate 20 years ago. Not anymore. Like in a very meaningful sense, it is about care, support services, healthy ageing, independence, connection, because that's what consumers are now demanding. Now, if you are living out in suburban Australia, in the big family home, 4 or 5 bedrooms, we've all seen that house. It might have been built in the late 1800s, the mid 1900s. Those homes weren't designed for ageing. Homes like that can lead to more trips and more slips, and obviously that then means that you're spending more time with your GP. You're spending longer time in hospital, and for a lot of people, sadly, there's also that premature entry into aged care facilities. Now, no one grows up wishing that they were, entering an aged care facility too soon. And given the state of that market at the moment, where there's literally no beds available, and you've got 3,000 to 4,000 Australians right now who are stuck in hospitals around the country, they've been medically discharged to leave the hospital, but they can't. Now, that's an awful public policy story. The retirement living industry, by contrast, is full of opportunity, not just for people living in them, but for governments as well. And so if you do look at the market fundamentals of the retirement living industry, when it does come to price point, availability, whatever, here it is. The average price for a 2-bedroom independent living unit, an ILU, is about $711,000. Vacancy is pretty tight. The market is effectively full. There are 27,000 waitlist applications from older Australians across the country today. So we know that these communities, these villages are incredibly popular. I'm going to mention before some of the great benefits that can be derived by living in one. So people are lining up down the road. The Net Promoter Score for retirement living operators, so of course that's a global metric to test satisfaction. The NPS for retirement village operators is plus 57. What does that mean? Apple, 65. Doctors, 50. Now we all trust our local GP. Retirement living operators, 57. So we know that people have a wonderful experience when they are living in retirement villages. So of course, $711,000 average price, average age of entry, 75, 76, NPS being 57, wait lists going down the road. Now, yes, it's a challenging time right now with new supply. The retirement living industry is no different to any other asset class in the property sector, given in a post-COVID environment.
I'm going to interrupt a little bit because it's quite interesting what you're saying there, but also from my perspective, because I've been involved with retirement villages and lifestyle options for quite a long time now, and the biggest change that I've seen, I would say within the last decade or so, is the diversity. Now, when I say diversity, I mean diversity of products. So years ago, it used to be if you wanted to go into a lifestyle village, you probably had to go into a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment that was probably really small. You probably wouldn't have a garage. You might have a parking space or a carport. Facilities may have still been good, but it was very limited on your actual choice of housing options. And here you are telling me that clearly people are loving this. Well, one of the reasons I expect is because of the diversity now from high-end inner-city apartments to sprawling 3 and 4 bedroom villas on beautiful estates. Yes. The choice is there because we're not all the same. We're not all the same when we're 25, and we're not all the same when we're 75. Some people want an apartment with a buzz. Others want to be in their own private villa with a private garden, their own driveway, and see nobody. but the diversity is there now, even with your own villages, huge diversity, and I think that's got a big role to play in why you're saying that happiness is coming through.
Retirement living has matured so much over the past 1 to 2 decades. Gone are the days where new retirement villages are gated communities. 8 in 10 development applications for retirement villages in in metropolitan locations these days are vertical.
Yes.
And so for a long time the sector was talking about what does the future of retirement living look like? I mean, it's literally happening in front of us right now. So, retirement villages in a physical sense are growing up. Now, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily 30-storey monstrosities, but some of them are beautiful at 4 to 5 stories in suburban Australia. And of course, that connectivity that you then get from those locations to public transport.
So,
to
and that's
GPs.
why I think there is that real connection between people, the users being and the residents being happier, because for some people, the apartment is just an awful thought. But for others, the villa's an awful thought. They want the apartment. So if you can cater for all different, and not just the diversity of the product, the home, it's a diversity of location form, because we are seeing them in inner cities and busy suburbs, but we're also still seeing them in semi-rural locations on the edge of suburbs where that will make some people happier.
And of course, the other factor being that baby boomers have redefined and redesigned everything that they've ever touched. And that applies to retirement villages too.
And our apartments are much more spacious than the apartments than you see in general
And of
real
course,
estate.
that's the great myth around downsizing versus right-sizing. For some people, right-sizing means moving to something bigger. For a lot of people, it means moving to something smaller. But it's also about the services and amenities. So we know that 47% of retirement villages around the country do have health and fitness programs available on site. Yes, there's this big conversation around what care and support services look like in a retirement village setting, but in every true sense, retirement villages are being transformed and reshaped by the people who are moving into these villages because their expectations are so high in terms of what they want.
You see a lot, Daniel, as you get around the country. We've talked product and location to some degree. Just on those facilities and services in the villages themselves, what do you see as standouts?
Look, we like to talk about care and support services as infrastructure, whether it's built form infrastructure or something that you bolt in or a program that you bring in. So we like to talk about care being infrastructure that makes sure that independence and independent living is the great outcome. Now, of course, people looking to move into a retirement village, which of course is not the same thing as an aged care facility, people are looking for independence, connection, lifestyle. Care as infrastructure can mean whatever you like. For a lot of villages, it can be health and fitness programs. For some villages, it might be a co-located aged care facility on site. And of course, 1 in 2 new development applications for retirement villages do contain co-located aged care facilities on site. But for others, it might just be bringing the community together 3 or 4 times a week to connect socially.
I think that's also very interesting is the health and wellness market that these villages offer is something that the young people are embracing. Now, developments that are looking to attract young city types, the 20-somethings, the 30-somethings, but they're renting or buying. Health and wellness within their own apartment building or in their own estate is key to there. So it's quite interesting that this sector of the market is just following what the youngsters are doing. It's all about everybody being able to enjoy a healthy life.
That's probably a good transition to the last point, Michael, that I think is quite interesting to talk about, and that is intergenerational aspects to retirement living. I visited this one beautiful village in Adelaide recently, and they had this little workshop or men's shed out the back. It was probably a 3 to 4 story retirement village in a pretty good spot. Out the front there was a commercial lease for an early learning centre, an ELC, where parents would drop the kids off before going out to school. But what they've done with the retirement village is the kids are bringing their broken wooden toys, and then a lot of the old blokes would take them to the workshop out the back, and it gives them great purpose. And purpose is such an important aspect for thinking about moving into a retirement village, whether it's having that intergenerational aspect where the wooden toys get brought in, or whether it's the local girls' school who comes in on site to have lunch with residents once a week. These are the small things that we can get right, and that they have so much benefit for people living in these communities.
If we then take the macro theme that we hear a lot about in the news at the moment, increasingly, some instability economically or politically, even socially, and the knock-on effect that that's have or is having in respect to the property market. What are you seeing when you correlate the property market to retirement living and how that works together?
I mean, obviously we are talking about demand right now outstripping supply. You know, I mentioned before the rapid growth in people over the age of 75 and what that might mean in the next 10 to 15 years on different parts of our community. But there is also a great opportunity for young people when it does come to an older person or an older couple making that decision to right-size, because it does free up family-sized homes in the middle of a market. So there is a really great story for governments at the moment to probably double down on their policy support for sectors like retirement living. When it comes to price point and price growth, you know, we never tell any prospective resident that moving into a retirement village is about generating or growing personal wealth. Moving in is not about building that vehicle to grow wealth. But what we have seen over the past 12 months, interestingly, is that the average price for an independent living unit in a retirement village has grown by about 9.2%. The general residential market about 5.5%. So now that very much is driven by that great big silver tsunami that is now washing through, because it is driving interest in age-friendly communities. Probably no surprise, given that every other day at the moment there's a tricky, challenging conversation about the state of the aged care sector, because that industry is experiencing great big structural stress. Now, of course, because aged care facilities are full, our hospitals are full. Because our hospitals are full, you know, it does create, well, in fact, ambulances are stuck on ramps, right? So there's that really important public policy conversation that is coalescing around the value proposition of retirement living, which is why I now think that it's not possible to talk about the future of the aged care sector without considering the great value proposition that retirement living offers. So if you are worried about accessing care and support services, wellness programs, physical fitness programs, it's probably no surprise that retirement living is growing in popularity, given you know, the prominence and precedence of some of these amenities being offered on site.
Yeah, thank you for kicking us off and putting forward, I guess, the case around retirement living and all of the benefits that come with it from what you're seeing. I guess if we move that now along in respect to what does this mean for selling my home. So if I'm considering the move into retirement living, what does this mean for selling my home? Where do I even start? How do I right size with confidence? These are all, of course, very key themes. We introduced Andrew a little earlier, but just in case, if anyone possibly is not aware that Andrew was host of Selling Houses Australia and Love It or List It Australia, there's plenty of make-up episodes to catch up on.
Oh, there's numerous ones.
But Andrew, this is a sweet spot for you. If we start with looking at what are buyers looking for in the market today? What may we start with?
Okay, because I think it's one of the major I mean, you guys, remember, they all are directly in the industry. I'm on the real estate side of things, and one of the biggest deals is the concern that there's two elements if you're considering going into a lifestyle village such as here, and that would be, first of all, finding a property, and secondly is selling your own property. Now, if you have decided to look at a lifestyle village, like one of the villages here, then you're streets ahead, because there's a good chance that you can speak to the sales team and reserve the one you want and be given a little bit of time to try and sell your existing property. Now, trust me, even though we're hearing all the media about the market quietening down, all the rest, which it is in a lot of cases, however, the demand is still quite high, and the moment something's sensibly priced, it's still selling. So what will happen is that you'll try to find your next home, and you get outbid, or there's nothing for sale, and you haven't sold yours, or you have to bridge, and it's all way too much stress. The wonderful benefit you have with a lifestyle village is that most cases you'll be able to go, well, there's lot 10, I really like lot 10, can I reserve it? And in many cases you'll be allowed to reserve it, be given that time and assistance to sell your own home. But that's just one part of it. The other major thing is selling your existing home. And for people that have been in a home for more than 10 or 15 years, it's a big deal. It's a big deal because the market's changed massively, how things are bought and sold. And secondly, just because you've lived in something for 10 to 15 years, that basically means that you've been personally hoarding stuff. And that includes all of us. Okay, I've just moved out of our family home that we were living in for only 5 years. 5 years for the winters is a long time. And the amount of culling we had to do from that 5 years was quite brutal. But it is a big worry, and it's not just about that worry of what you're going to do with your stuff. Not that you might be moving to something very similar size, but whatever it is, you still want to start culling a little bit. But it's also, how is the market going to view your home? Because of programs like Selling Houses, Love It or List It. I think there's one called The Rock, is it? Something, I can't remember what it's called. That other show. It's all about, the glitz and the glamour and these perfectly presented dream homes that they sell for record prices. Well, the reality of it is most people's homes do not look like that. I promise you, they do not look like that. However, what there is you've got to judge and take advice as to where your home sits. Because if your home is perhaps less than 10 years old, a quick coat of paint and a tidy up, you should be good to go. The moment it starts to get towards 15 and older, there's a good chance that kitchens and bathrooms will be beginning to look dated. So does that mean you need to get all new kitchens and bathrooms? Well, in my experience, the answer is no, you don't. Because what you have to do is just adjust your expectations. Now, let's say you've been living in a house for 20 years and you've maintained it beautifully, but you haven't changed floorings or kitchens and bathrooms, which wouldn't actually be that unusual. In theory, you should have done. You should have spent a little bit more money, right? And you haven't. So you can't expect to sell for a similar price at the house that's only 3 or 4 years old down the road, or the property that's 5 years older than yours, but in fact had a full and major renovation 7 or 8 years ago and is now for sale, because it's more up to date, they've spent more money on it. So it's all about being realistic about what you can achieve for your home. However, and here's the rather great news for those of you that haven't updated your home, is the fact that there's a real thing going on in the market now about price point, because our values are so high. And I actually saw a great example of this in Sydney this weekend myself. It's a big press that all the Sydney listings, nothing's selling at auction. Well, I attended an auction on Saturday, and the home was a full renovator. The people have been in it 25, 30 years, and it was really daggy. It was, however, what they had done is the gardens were immaculate, it was clean and tidy, or they'd decluttered everything, no staging had gone on, it was just basic. However, whereas everything else wasn't selling that weekend, that one sold. And the reason it sold was the family, when I spoke to the family that bought it, just saving a couple of $100,000 was more important to them than having everything all shiny and new and renovated. That was the key. They thought, look, we can do the kitchen on our own time. Right. This is actually something we haven't seen in the market for probably 15 plus years. Yeah. But now suddenly the home that's got a little bit of updating required, but is just a little bit cheaper than everything else, is now the one, because all the young families are now very, very price motivated. They're scared to death. The poor generation down in their 30s and 40s now with their big mortgages, their mortgages have got that many zeros, you wouldn't know what to do with it. Admittedly, they're paying lower interest rates, I know, but it's still tight. So if you've got a good quality home in a good area and you're able to give it a spruce up, make sure the light's coming in, tidy everything up, no greenery across the windows, no clutter, all that sort of thing. If you've got clutter, fill the roof and the garage, I don't care. You're going to have to pack it up, I'm just heads up. But it's a great way of, nobody cares about the garage or the attic. Fill it up. But clear it so that a buyer can see that it's a perfectly habitable and comfortable home. That really costs you next to nothing. It's just a time thing. And if you do think there's anything to be done, it's in essential repairs. It's possibly you had a leak in the roof, that was solved 3 or 4 years ago, but there's still the damp patches on the ceiling. Get that decorated. Things that don't work, get them repaired. Cracks, have them filled. Those sorts of things are much more important than the new shiny kitchens and bathrooms. Obviously, we don't say that on Selling Houses Australia because we wouldn't have a show. But that's the truth. That's what's going on in the market at the moment. So it's a real advantage for anybody that has been in an older home, and that's of any concern. For a lot of people, you might have only been in your home 5 or 10 years, so that's not going to be relevant. The old rules apply. clean, declutter, make sure everything's shiny and bright, and be realistic with your price.
Well, that's music to my ears, because my mother-in-law, who's very keen to make the move, has for the best part of the last 5 years been putting it off.
Yes.
Because she's been increasingly adding or renovating or polishing in the hope that that will ultimately make a difference down the track. But of course, it's taking time away from making them.
And also, there's another real estate myth, and you hear it all the time by amateurs. Kitchens and bathrooms sell houses. they do, but only in context. Because, for example, a standard 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, single-level home you'd see anywhere in Australia, let's say it's 30 years old, so you decide that you're going to sell it, and you've been so you're going to do a beautiful new kitchen, and that's where you spend all your money. But you don't clean and tidy the rest of the house, you don't decorate the rest of the house, because all your money's gone on the kitchen. You might as well almost not have bothered. You would have been better doing a tweak of the kitchen, a tweak of one of the bathrooms, and a bit of new flooring and some paint, than just focusing on one area. And that's where it gets tricky. So you also have to decide that unless you've got some really trusted agent or somebody that you can really trust to advise you, you are better just sticking to the basics, because what paint do you choose? And if you go for a kitchen, do you go for an all-white kitchen? Well, you do that, you'll be shocked, because that's about as untrend as you can get. Sorry to any of you got white kitchens. So this is the thing. You go and spend 30 or 40 or 50 on your new kitchen, and then it's not what the buyers want.
It's not what
Then it's really wasted money. So right now, it's probably less of a concern than it was 5 or 10 years ago. We're beginning to see the return of buyers that will just want something in good condition. If it means they can do some stuff to it in their own time, but the price point's just slightly under everybody else, and I mean literally slightly under is enough to do it, you'll have saved a fortune on renovations and costly expenditure, and also, as we know, getting trades in is harder than ever. Just take advice and be sensible about your price. And then that means your sales side of things will happen relatively quickly. And by coming into a Keyton Village, you've obviously got the ability to reserve the home, and you'll be given that time. And I think so it's a really, it doesn't need to be anywhere near as stressful as it can be perceived to be. And that's because there are only 2 sectors to it. It's choosing your home, which is choosing this route. It could be really positive, you can tick that box. And then the other side is don't panic. Just get good advice. And believe it or not, there are good agents out there. There are a lot of awful ones. And trust me, sometimes on selling houses, we really have to go. We can't. Yeah,
I think I saw all the billboards for these agents on the drive on the Bruce Highway, actually.
Andrew, you've given some very real and good practical tips there about what to consider when selling your home. You would have experienced over time also that emotional moment or impact, that decision of staying versus moving. There's the rational components, such as what do I do to my home, but the emotion is a big piece as well.
The emotion is the huge part, usually dependent on how long you've been living in the home. That will be number one.
Well, Andrew, there's a question that's actually come through online, and it speaks to this point. I'd like to move into a village, but I'm so worried about moving. It feels so big. We've been here for 30 years. Where do I start?
Yeah, well, and that actually, so the emotional thing is a massive part of it, especially if, for example, that one there, the question there, 30 years, it's a huge deal. But it's sort of, you just have to take the bull by the horns, if that makes sense. The best thing there is looking for your new property. Because I think it seems even more daunting when you haven't got an end result in mind. So when, for example, whatever your house move was, at any stage of your life, if you're just going, we're just selling up and we'll buy something, you might be able to do that when you're 35 with that excitement. But when you get a little bit older, it's very much you need to know what you're moving to. And I think I think if you can start, so for example, let's say you were looking at Keyton Village and you looked at one particular one and you really liked it, that will help with that emotional side, because you've got somewhere to move to. And I think that's a real key to start the process there, because if you haven't, you're just selling for what reason? There's no end result.
It's not tangible.
No, it's not tangible. I think that's exactly the right word. So to help control the emotion. But I mean, look, let's be honest, photographs, videos, your own life story of 30 years won't go away because you're not in the house. But what will go away is the massive, and I mean massive, building insurance premium that you're paying every year for your freestanding house. That will go away. The huge council rates you're paying for your huge freestanding house. The fact that the fence blew down the last time you had a storm, or that the gutters need cleaning again, or the roof needs cleaning, or this doesn't work, or the hot water system's about to fail. And every time you go away, you're worried you're going to be burgled. Let's be realistic here.
I mean, you're talking me into this as I sit here right now.
I know, exactly. So this is the thing. You've got to sort of break it down. There's a whole lot of positives to making the move.
Oh, I do recall, and this is going back a number of years. It might have even been pre-COVID, Andrew.
When was that time?
When was that? But it was a similar type of event, and you posed the question at the start of the event was. Hands up if you've been living in your home for 10 years, and pretty much, or 5 years, pretty much the whole room naturally put the hand up. And then there was these incremental years. There was the 10 years, and then there was the 20 years, and the 30 years. Got to 40, got to 50 in some cases. It is a big moment.
Look, it's a huge moment, but it's very interesting because I think this is going to change, just letting you guys know, because you know how you were saying your demographics changing.
Right.
One of the things is that the generation that are coming through now and coming into lifestyle villages might have moved a lot more times. We might find that if we sat here in 10 years' time and we did that again, there will be far more people. There'll be far more people that will be just hovering around the 10-year time rather than the 20 and 30, because I think we've moved. More recent generations have moved house a lot more, partly because I think going back 30 to 40 years ago, it was quite easy as a young family to buy your forever home, one that was big enough, that was going to see you with 4 or 5 kids and all the rest of it in place you'd always want to be. For people that have been buying in the last 15, 20, 25 years, that's been harder, and you've had to get to the big forever home, you've had to work your way up a series of steps up the property ladder. So you've moved in that time. So moving isn't quite so extreme. I remember when I first met my wife, we were both living in London, and the apartment I had at the time was in 200 metres of Tower Bridge. It was absolutely in the middle of central London. And when my wife joined me there, we loved it. And we always said that when we got older, that we would want to live in an apartment in a busy place. And only 3 weeks ago, my wife and I, now without the kids, have just bought an apartment in a very, very busy place, because that was the kind of vibe that we were trying to get, which is what I was saying about the diversity of housing stock. And I think this is the important thing, is that if you've lived in an apartment when you're younger, living in an apartment or a small villa when you're older is great. You associate it with youth. But if you've never lived in an apartment or a villa, possibly an apartment is not the right option for you. Go into a decent-sized villa. Don't shrink your household down to a size that you're not comfortable with. There are that many options out there, and I don't think there's this need, back to the stress, to push yourself to something too small that you won't be comfortable with. You've got to find that sweet point. And most 3-bedroom homes on offer in lifestyle villages are not small, so you don't have to if you don't want to.
And of course there's the environment around the property itself as well that you're immersing yourself in.
You brought up a very good point. I forget that. Okay, so your big freestanding house has a big garden, you have a 2-3 car garage, you have all this space around you, which all needs maintenance. The beauty of a lifestyle village, in fact, whether it's an apartment or whether it's a villa complex, whatever, is you have your accommodation you live in and you have your personal private outdoor space. So you've got your privacy, that's great. However, what you've got is far more space than you'll have at home, because you've got probably a shed, a much bigger swimming pool, a place to do yoga, a community centre, maybe even a shed far bigger than the one you had at home. All these options are an extension of a home that if you moved into another house and land package or a townhouse complex or even an ordinary apartment, which might have a pool, but that will be it, you're suddenly gaining all these extra features that probably have far bigger space than your house would ever have.
Thank you, Andrew. Hopefully we're getting a sense here, looking at initially the broader retirement living market and the benefits that relate to it, what's happening in the property market, understanding the psyche of both buyers and sellers, Steph, I might bring you in now because if anyone has first-hand experience of the retirement living offer on the ground, it's certainly yourself. So Steph's been
You're looking very good for 75.
Steph's been working in the industry for 21 years. Happy birthday for your property experience, and 7 years more specifically within retirement living. Steph, I know you wanted to start with a story that sort of encapsulates that experience.
Absolutely. And listening to Daniel and Andrew speak has absolutely just made me remember a story that sticks with me from the very first retirement village I visited when I started 7 years ago in retirement living. I actually went to visit one of our villages in Rowville in Victoria, and I was walking through the community clubhouse and came across some residents having their morning coffee, and introduced myself, and I asked them all a question, which is, do you enjoy living here? And of course, unanimously, they all said yes. But it was a resident Julie's story that sticks with me, even today, 7 years later, because Julie and her husband Jeff, they had a 30-year-old house that they'd been in for 30 years, and they made the decision to move to retirement living into our Waterford village. But what happened for them was they had started looking 5 to 6 years before they made the move, and they did their research, they went on websites, they went to visit some villages, took some brochures home, but decided it wasn't the right time for them. But a few years down the track, Jeff was now retired, fully retired rather than semi-retired, and he was up on the ladder cleaning the gutters, you mentioned before the gutters, cleaning the gutters as he had many, many times before. He lost his balance and fell. Luckily, the grass cushioned his landing, and other than a hurt ego and a bruised backside, he was unscathed. But it did have him thinking, because Jeff was a planner, and he did worry. He worried if he wasn't so lucky, would Julie make the move by herself?
Right.
She wouldn't be able to maintain the home. It was going to get harder and harder as they got older and older. And he just knew it was going to be easier if they did it together. So what Julie and Jeff decided to do was to stop reflecting on the life that they had lived for the 30 years in their 4-bedroom brick veneer home, with their daughter's wedding photos on the walls and the son's cricket trophies in the cabinets, and started thinking about the life they wanted to live. So they went back out again to visit some villages and decided now was the time. They listed their house in the spring because, that's the best time to list the house. And they made the move. They obviously were attracted to the things that you mentioned before around the fact that it is you have a lot more protections moving into a retirement village than you do in general real estate. It's obligation free. If you can't sell your home, often you're not even paying a deposit, and if you do, it's minimal and it's refundable if you change your mind or your circumstances change. But they moved into the community, and they were very active. Jeff spent at least 3 mornings a week on the golf course, because our village there does overlook a golf course. And Julie spent her time with the shopping trips, the local Westfield, and she did love the happy hour. Happy hour is always a very popular occasion to get to as well. But I think it was about 10 to 15 years they spent together in the community. But then, unfortunately, when Jeff passed away, Julie found herself surrounded by the love and support of the community around her. So the grandkids and the kids visited every day at first, but it didn't take long until she told them to stop.
Yeah.
Because, just stop.
Because she was sick of them.
She was sick of them. She was sick of them. No, but she just said, look, of course she missed him, but she wasn't alone. She really wasn't alone, and I think that's what she was talking
No, it's
to.
a
The fact
meaningful
that
story,
Jeff
isn't it?
knew that.
It was a proactive decision
It was
that helped, as opposed
proactive-
to that decision being made 15 years, maybe too late.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know...
I'm just that bottom question, as someone's asked, are there people out there who can help us figure out what will fit into a smaller space? Our family home is a lot bigger, and these villages have homes that are smaller. How do I know what to bring, where to put my stuff from the shed? And that actually sums it up. Can you imagine that you're halting such a really fundamentally exciting decision with a couple of pieces of furniture and stuff in your shed? That's really quite easily solved. But it just takes a lot of strength sometimes to... And there was a great... we call it right sizing now, but somebody that used to... that we work with that used to actually help people, because there are people out there that will come in and help you. Literally, if your friends and family don't want to do it, because there's going to be rows, there are services to help you. And I remember her tip that she gave, and it was such a good tip, was you collate all the really important things in your life, from your family dining table that you've had Christmas lunch for the last 20 years to all your kids' trophies, all their art, all this huge amount of stuff. You photograph everything and you get it put into a beautiful hardback coffee table book. And that is all you take with you. Literally. Because do you remember the table we used to eat dinner? Yes, there it is. How about all my art? Page 37 through to 59.
It can be a big coffee table book.
It can be a really big... Because even the biggest coffee table book could still get everybody... This is the amazing thing. It is possible. So all those memories don't have to be lost. In fact, the particular lady that was telling us that how she... that the clients that had done it said the book was, especially with people like the grandkids, it was the most fun book ever. Oh, look at that ugly chair, or what's that? Who did that terrible picture? That was your mum. You know, it's really actually lovely. So all the memories aren't lost. It's just more condensed.
Or divided. Give them to the kids to take home to their big houses.
They'll never look at
lots
it.
of storage.
Well, to pick up that question there, Andrew, around who can help us on the journey and figuring out what to do next. Steph, we might come back to you on that, because in terms of the very first moment, when you connect in with a retirement community, what does that journey feel like?
Yeah, so we'll talk to the Keyton retirement journey, but it will be the same across the board. It usually starts with your own research. You will have gone on websites, seen some advertisements, maybe heard some ads on the radio. You'll be doing your own research. But the real starts by picking up the phone and having a conversation with our customer service team or with our sales team, because that's where we can find out what's important for you. For some people, it will be the homes themselves, what they look like, what the accommodation looks like. For others, it'll be about the wellbeing offerings. For others, it's financial. Tell me the numbers. But that's the starting point. Then from there, the rubber really hits the road when you visit a village.
Okay.
Most say that that's where it comes to life, because you meet the village team. You know, they're the heart and soul of what you're buying into. They're the ones that are going to be with you. Obviously, you can have your time away in your own homes. It is still independent living, and how active you are in the community, or how you know, how you spend most of your time in your unit is completely up to you. But meeting the village team, meeting the maintenance manager, understanding what life will look like in that community is really the next step. But it is so tailored to your own individual options, which is why then the part after is getting into the detail. And often this is where we will talk through your options of our contracts, or we like to call them plans. And you might want to seek independent advice, financial advice, as to what's best for you based on your own personal circumstances. But that's the journey at the beginning, and making that choice to move into a retirement.
Can I, if I wish, meet other residents who are actually living in the village and experiencing the day-to-day life?
Absolutely, we encourage it. Often when you do have a tour, we will organise for you to speak to a resident. Julie herself, who I was talking to before, she was one that our sales manager would often take prospects too. She would generally take some who had come from their second or third visit and take them off the fence based on her story. But these are going to be your neighbours, so of course we get you to meet them.
I think the other thing that has to be brought into the debate is the freedom. The freedom that comes with living in a village like this is in respect of your time. So you've got full control of your time. If you want to go away for 3 or 4 weeks, the house isn't going to need anyone to keep an eye on it. Well, everything's kind of looked after. So if you're still at that age and time of life that you want to do lots of travelling, or maybe the family aren't close by and you've chosen that purpose, but you enjoy a month with them every year, you can just disappear for a month. So it's all that freedom. And if you want to get involved with things within the village, if you want to be involved with any of the gardening or the men's shed or any of the activities, that again is your choice. When you're sitting there on your 900 square metre sloping block, that garden maintenance isn't a choice. If there's a big event coming up at the weekend and your gardens needs, you've got that problem. Whereas it just gives you more freedom. And as I said, it's not the confines of your 900 square metres, it's the confines of the whole village.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is, and it's like a smorgasbord or a buffet of what you want to do. Yeah. We have residents who still work. They still work.
In fact, without jumping to the questions, let's keep going on that theme, though. There is someone online who was referenced exactly that. I'm 60, I work part-time, not ready to retire just yet. Are there people still working and not fully retired in your villages?
Absolutely. We have a resident, I don't know if she's fully retired now, but at the time when I met her in one of our villages, she was still working full-time at a school, a local school in the administration. But she was divorced. She liked the community around her. She felt safe and secure. She worked school hours, so often she was back in time for happy hour. Yes. So still got to socialise a lot, but yeah, it's absolutely.
I guess you have morphed now into, we've made the decision to move in, the experience on site and what that means. Because if I was to extend that question, is there a spread of interests and ages in your villages? I would like to live in a vibrant community close to shops and services. How common are these themes or not?
Oh, absolutely. They are such vibrant places. We have often some that are in walking distance to local shops and amenities. If not, there's the village bus that takes you there every day if need be. But it really, the calendar, we often, and you will see this if you go to a village tour, you'll get the calendar of events. You'll see what an average week or month looks like. Living in a village, from trivia to bingo to mahjong. No two villages are exactly the same because the residents shape their community as well.
And they are definitely allowed dogs, because I can see somebody saying about dogs and animals. I presume pets are allowed in most of the villages?
Yes, in 95% of locations.
Yeah, that's right.
99.5%.
Of course, a lot of people are more busy in retirement than what they were before.
Yeah.
But just one brief extension mark with the previous question.
No llamas.
No llamas. No llamas, no camels. But by law, we're talking about over 55s. So state legislation dictates that someone in the couple, if it's a couple, has to be 55. No, you don't have to be retired from working, so to speak, but it's 55 years and up is what the legislation allows for.
To be honest, I think with the way of the world economy these days, there's going to be a lot more people, maybe not working full-time, but also choosing. A lot of people 70 plus choose to work, even on a part-time basis.
And keeps them engaged.
Absolutely.
Or on boards.
Yeah.
We have residents who just continue to...
Yeah,
they've had
very nice.
Great jobs, and now they sit on a board.
And the dog is a friendly old chap, so we look forward to meeting him or her in the future. That's lovely. Well, we might morph now into the last component and keep going with some questions and answers. And for those in the room, we're very happy to stay back post the next 5 or 10 minutes and answer any questions personally. For those who are online, if there are any questions that we don't get to, rest assured we will compile answers to all of those, and we're going to recirculate those answers to everyone who was registered for today's event. So we will get
But those online don't get cake after, do they?
That's the only downside.
See, if you'd come here, you'd have got cake.
We'll come back to, I guess, a theme that's simmered under the surface through the course of today. I can see it referenced again here in respect to the property market downturn.
Yes.
But then, of course, more broadly, we've seen significant general residential price increases over the best part of the last decade. What would you say, I might go to you, Andrew, on someone waiting for the perfect time?
Okay, there's no such thing as a perfect time in the market. There's only a perfect time for you to sell. And that generally is when you're in the right position to be able to do so, and it's the right time for you. The key with this downturn at the moment, we are seeing prices adjusting across most parts of Australia. I wouldn't worry too much about it, to be honest. We've had so much growth in recent years. It's huge. But also what we're tending to see is that whilst that is adjusting, good properties are still selling for a reasonable amount of money. Now, if you are buying and selling at the same sort of time in the market, it's kind of almost irrelevant. The only time it does get a little bit more complex is for those of you that are thinking about an interstate move. So, for example, right now, Victoria, if you're living there, their prices are low. So if you're living in Queensland...
And their taxes are high.
Their taxes are high, but then, you know, these guys might be okay. If you are moving from Queensland to Victoria, you're going to feel financial royalty. If you're moving from Victoria to Queensland, it's going to be more of a stretch. So those interstate moves are a little bit more complicated. But if you're planning to move within South Australia or move within Greater Sydney or something like that, to be honest, the market... Look, there's one comment there that, inflation on retirement living prices keep going up. Only in line with the market, to be perfectly honest. So the reality of it is, if the market's taking a massive downturn in the normal housing market, these guys won't be able to sell their properties either. So the prices are always going to be within the same market, are going to be on tap. So you don't have to be worried about that. What you have to be concerned with is the gap. It's all about the gap. So for example, let's say you were hoping your home was going to be worth around 1.516 million, and you're hoping to buy for around 900 or $1 million. The reality of it is, if you can only get 1.4, you might have to revisit what you're looking at and maybe just come down to the 800s. That means you might have to get something a little smaller or in a slightly different village. That's really the only difference that it's going to be. You've got to focus on the gap. Or you might decide that your gross of 600 wasn't, you can do 500 would be okay with the gap. That's what you've really got to be focused on, because it's very hard to try and play the property game. And timing it, I give the same advice to first home buyers. In fact, when my eldest daughter and a partner bought their place, all I got was, are you sure it's the right time? Are you sure it's the right time? It's the right time because right now you've got the deposit and the ability to buy. You buy now. And remember, it's only relevant when you come to sell. The whole thing is, and if you've owned your property for more than 3 to 5 years, you'll be making a profit.
Mike Landers just reminded me of what we call the affordability ratio in retirement living. So the average price for a 2-bedroom unit across the country is 61% of the median house price in that same postcode. So it's 61% of that house across the road in the general housing.
So if you took that in pure and simple generic figures, you might be sitting in $1 million home and you should be able to get your property for around 600. So just as a general guide.
As a general rule.
So there's the gap.
And what I heard from Andrew was move to Victoria and feel like royalty. That's what I heard.
That's great value at the moment.
I think we'll segue to the question around contracts, because it does have a neat link to that financial consideration. So when I'm buying into the village, do I have a choice of contracts? How does that work? Steph, that's home territory for you.
It is home territory for me, and obviously contracts are well known. In Keyton, we like to call them plans. Right. And we do have options and choice, which is really important because, I mentioned before, everybody's circumstances are different. So what we have is a choice of plans. Some that offer freedom and flexibility, so you unlock your equity now so that you can enjoy the retirement you want to now. Some that more focused on capital growth and no capital loss, and others that are around certainty. I want to know exactly what I get at the end and when I'm going to get it. So, but the main thing is there is choice.
Choice of contract.
And also, these contracts sit within a legislative framework, which is state by state. They sit within a legislative framework that does allow for consumer protection for people looking to move into a retirement village. There's a lot of consumer protections in retirement village legislation right across the country, and contracts sit within those frameworks.
And can I just, from a real estate perspective, explain why it's, that's there? It's because imagine a conventional housing estate. They'll put in a park with a little swing set maybe for the kids and a little bike track, 0.5 kilometres going nowhere. That's it. That's the amenities you'll get. Every other amenity, you'll be purely reliant on the surrounding area. Even an apartment complex, you may get a pool. But that will be just about it. Maybe a little gym that, has got 3 pieces of machinery in it. That again is it. The facilities that you get in these lifestyle villages, even in the apartment complexes, are huge. Nothing's for free. You have to, if you want to have that much amenity, then it's going to come at a little price. But in fact, when you weigh it up, the actual cost is pretty incredible, because we were saying that your products across your 65 villages typically sit at below $1 million. Well, most houses in Australia don't sit below $1 million anymore.
This question, thank you for today. I know so much more about retirement living. That's lovely. What's the biggest myth you hear about retirement living? I think this is home territory for yourself now.
I can feel a question coming to me.
Yeah.
The retirement living and aged care are the same thing.
No, they're not.
They're not. They're two very different propositions. Aged care for a lot of people is about safety. It's about round-the-clock care. And in a lot of circumstances, given that dementia is now the leading cause of death in Australia, it's about dementia too, as is some retirement villages. But retirement living is about independence, it's about lifestyle. We hear 2 bits of feedback right across the country, one from people living in a village, and that is, gee, I wish I'd made the move sooner. And the other thing that I hear from operators to prospective residents is, don't leave the move too late. But the biggest myth, particularly right now, given all these big structural challenges, is that aged care facilities and retirement villages are the same thing, and they're not.
Thank you for demystifying that officially. Maybe last question as we broach in, but I might have you all answer this one.
Okay.
If you could give someone watching today one piece of advice about making their move, what would it be? One piece of advice about making their next move, what would it be? And I might go in the reverse order to what we started. Steph?
I would say focus on what you're gaining, not on what you perceive you'll lose. That would be my main piece of advice, because as you said, everyone that lives in a village generally says, I wish I had made the move earlier. We hear that echoed across the board. And when we really think about why, when we ask why didn't you, often it's because they're focusing too much on the perception of what they're losing versus what they all tell us, which is what they gained. Gained freedom, gained more time for the activities they always wanted to do, more time with the grandkids, and often the grandkids want to visit more because of the pools and the cinema rooms, and the kids want to visit more too because they're not asked to do so much around the house. So focus on what you're going to gain, not what you're going to lose.
Thank you. Andrew?
Oh, that's quite easy. Don't obsess over your giant dining table and your dinner set for 20 people that you never use. If literally that does, I've seen it. That's what people obsess about. And that's of such, it's just so irrelevant. Family, well-being, lifestyle, health, excitement, that's what you should be focusing on, not worrying about a few odds and ends, really. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Michael, I went go-karting with some retirement village residents recently, and there was this moment where...
Did you win?
No, I got smashed. I went in confident, and that lasted right until the first corner. But what struck me that day, watching the 77-year-old guy, who was about 6 foot tall, get into his go-kart, these things were about an inch off the ground, right? He was helped in by 2 people, one other side, and I thought, gee, this won't end well. But he got out there. Like, once he was in, he was away.
Yes.
Right? And from the sidelines, you couldn't tell how old Don was. But the thing that struck me that day, that became the perfect metaphor for retirement living. because support and help is there when you need it, so that you can then keep operating under your own power. So the thing that I would tell people is support is here. Yes, these communities are about independence and lifestyle, but little bits of support and help along the way to ensure that that independence does remain, it's so important. So don't be worried about
It
that.
can even be something as simple as perhaps you just want a cleaner. Right now, trying to find a cleaner for your 5-bedroom house in a cul-de-sac in the burbs, or trying to find a cleaner in a lifestyle village when there's enough work to keep a cleaner busy full time, that you'll find one, because there's the efficiency, because it's doing number 3 and number 9 and number 11. Whereas, so it's just a silly little thing like that is easier to source because
Economies of scale.
exactly.
I think we're on time, and I think it's also very clear this is more than just about property. It is about...
Do you have a brochure, by the way?
Well, I'm sure we can find one.
You're
for
too
you.
young, Andrew.
Quality of life is coming your way, Andrew. Quality of life, health and well-being, that sits at the heart of all of that. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Steph. For
Well, look
being
at the
here.
last question you just
Beautiful
had on the
Buckingham
interstate
Gardens.
move.
I advise...
The interstate move. Yes.
Can I move
Yes, we
interstate?
can also offer interstate moves with the 65 villages and resorts across the country. Absolutely.
Yes, so when
We
your
can make
family
that work.
relocates to South Australia, you can do it within the family.
And to that point, if you'd like to continue the conversation, for those in the room, we're happy to continue it here today or after today. For those online, you can certainly connect with us via the Keyton website, which has a contact form. You can also call our customer support team on our 1-800 number, which is also on the website, but for record, it's 1-800-550-550. Or, of course, you can pop into your local Keyton village and just say hello and meet the team. If you enjoyed today, we are running another one of these sessions, I believe, in August, where we'll continue the right sizing and practical advice journey. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you again for our special guests.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.